our podcast, Often Racing. We're joined by Mitch Cunningham out here at his beautiful Ridgmontfarm. Thanks for coming on, Mitch.
Thanks, George. Thanks for coming.
You just took us on a tour while we were waiting on Dave. But no, beautiful, mate. The infrastructure you're putting in here, it's incredible what you're building.
Yeah, look, I guess the investment or the capital expenditure it takes to build a farm up to this scale is significant. And we're right in the throes of that at the moment. The farm will change landscape material over the next few years, and we're really excited about some of the projects we've got on the go at the moment. I've just taken you boys up to our new foaling unit, which will be ready for the season, which is exciting. So that'll be state of the art, and hopefully we have best practice in that department, which is so key to it's the first phase of life for our horses on the farm. And if that's a good experience for both mare and foal, we feel like that's a great start for them. We've got a lot going on, and it's a significant undertaking, but we're enjoying it for sure.
Have you found it hard to juggle all the infrastructure and the buildings going on with still trying to run a functioning farm? Because you still had some fantastic results at the recent English Easter sale.
Yeah, I'd say, George, that's not me juggling anything. It's just we've got really good staff. I've got the team who manage the place do an incredible job. I'm learning things from them every day. I'm not sort of long for this game. I've only been in it for a few years, and so we focus primarily on getting key people to the farm who we felt could take us to those lofty, ambitious heights we want to take the place. And so we were aggressive with who we brought to the farm in management positions. And so, as you say, juggling the infrastructure projects of the farm, along with preparing the yearlings, along with our racing arm, is obviously a significant undertaking, made a lot easier by the staff we have here.
How many horses do you want to get to? Do you have a goal?
We're probably, at the moment we've got about 45 mares on the farm. We've scaled that right back from about 80 in the last few months to give us the latitude to put in place our practices and our infrastructure in order to grow in a more manageable way. I think an ideal number for a farm of this sort of, footprint would be in the order of 80, 90 mares, and we can handle that very comfortably. That wouldn't be even close to overstocking the farm. So we'll move towards that, but it'll be an organic, slow growth. To that point, we're not in a rush.
You've got definitely one of the more interesting backgrounds of anyone that I've come across in the industry. The farm itself's quite in its infancy, but you were a pilot, and then you did that for 10 years, was it? And in Hong Kong?
Yeah. I was flying for Cathay Pacific in Hong Kong. It's a Hong Kong-based airline, and I was there for 10 years. I was on the 747 and the 777 while I was there, and
We're going on this after this podcast.
there's the 747
the private jet out the back.
We just don't have we're building all that work up there. Is the runway we're building.
You were terrified of the planes.
I don't remember how to do it anymore, so I'd be terrified too. We were there for 10 years, my wife and I, and then we started having kids. Hong Kong is such a great place. I don't know if you guys have been there, but it's just like the racing there, for one, is probably the funnest racing I've ever experienced. They do it totally differently. But Hong Kong is I feel, more of a young person's town where you're not really worried about.
You'd raise a family.
It's just tough once you start looking at it like that, and space is pretty confined there, and it's incredibly expensive to live there, and backyards are rare, parks are rare. It's a pretty fast place to live. But once we started having kids, we started reassessing really how we wanted to live. being an airline pilot is typically one of those things that people are just deeply passionate about being. It's been their life's ambition to be a pilot, whereas for me, it wasn't that. And it's pretty unusual for someone to be with an airline for 10 years and then just leave. I think most people go into that career with the view that that's them done. They've probably been working their whole life to get to the airlines. They get to the airlines and then they get their sort of payday and they're in clover. Whereas for me, it was a bit of a different path in. I guess the same way I've come into the horses is the same way I got into the aviation side of things, and it was non-traditional. I didn't have any flying experience before I got into Cathay. I got a cadetship where they take it's a relatively significant recruitment process, but basically they're looking for untrained pilots, and they come in and they pay for your flying. You live with them for 2 years at a training facility, and then once you've finished, you owe a return of service effectively. So you join the airline and you work your way up through the airline. So I did that in a pretty non-traditional way, and maybe that hardened my mind in that you don't necessarily have those traditional obstacles that people might see as a barrier to entry. So when I started having kids, I think the novelty of being away so much wore off, and I really craved just being at home with the kids and with my wife. And I just sort of, I suppose, started seeing things a bit differently and started plotting my path into a new career.
And then you didn't just go straight into the horses. You had a couple of, was it gyms and stuff up in Brisbane?
Yeah. Well, no, the gyms were, they came second to the horses. I came back from Hong Kong in 2018, I think it was, and it was off the back of a conversation with my father, who, we'd always been into racing, but at a hobbyist level, and my father and my younger brother and I were spending most of our weekends watching races and just loving it, and moving into racehorse ownership for the first time. And we started having discussions around maybe there was something we could do in more earnest in the industry together. We didn't know what that looked like at the time. It was probably more at the time looking at the racing side of things and what we could do there. But
most people buy a few shares.
Yeah.
You bought a farm.
Yeah, well, we had that typical experience of your first racehorse being a really good one.
Yeah.
And then everything downhill from there.
That was light up.
That was light up the room.
Yeah.
So that was off your old place at
Torryburn. Yeah, I worked at the Mare. So.
And she was just a ripper. She was a So You Think filly we bought for, I think, 120,000. I think it was So You Think second season or something, was it? Anyway, he was obviously such a champion racehorse himself, and we loved him, and so we bought this filly. I can't say it was anything more than closing our eyes and throwing a dart at a dartboard, frankly. There's no genius in what we did, but we got a good one. And so
who picked that horse?
John Foote.
John Foote.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we raced her. She was pre-Christmas 2-year-old, which was, as I say, you think is, as you both know, pretty unusual. And then she just started winning, and she was multiple stakes placed, and was just as far as horses go, frankly, she was top shelf. There not many of them go on and do that. So she was maybe a bit of a poison chalice because she sucked us right in. And it was all over from there. And so we had such a good experience with her that the whole family started really, I guess, drinking the Kool-Aid, and we just became immersed in it. And I decided, with, I guess, much encouragement from my dad, Gary, to start exploring different opportunities for us. And so, I guess, long story short, I moved home, packed up, resigned from Cathay, came back to Australia, and within, I think, 6 months, we had bought Glastonbury Farm, which was the initial 220 acres of what is now 550 acres here, and rebadged at Ridgemont, and we're sort of drinking from a fire hose from that point on.
And you live on the farm now, so you've gone from Hong Kong to Scone.
Yeah, I live just there with the kids. I've just moved down in December.
Yeah.
But I was commuting back and forth before that. Again, I sort of found myself in a position where I was just repeating history, and that I was, away a lot, and that's just not what was the design for all of this. And so we all moved down as a family, and my wife and kids are just loving it. The schools here are unbelievable, and my wife is the most adaptable person ever. So she's just in boots and all, and she loves it, and so we're really happy down there, and it's been the right move for us for sure.
And in the early stages, you had a few partners involved in it, but now it's just the Cunningham family.
Yeah, it's just us. So we've got the racing arm, which is Cunningham Thoroughbreds, and we've got Ridgemont, which is owned by our family outright. So really, the only separation between the two entities is one's racing, one's breeding in the farm.
And you're obviously based here, and you've got your staff, obviously Chris and everything do a great job, so you work with them to run the farm, but would your dad have much say in it then?
Dad's involved. If you've ever met him, you'd know he's a pretty intelligent fellow who is a diehard racing tragic, just loves it. He spends all his spare time watching racing and reading form, but he's retired, and he I think his interest lies in the strategy for the farm and the strategy for what we're doing here, but he involves himself when it's important for him to be involved. Outside of that, he's enjoying his retirement.
Does he live on the farm?
No, he's on the Gold Coast. Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Some nice golf courses right there.
Yeah, he's sold up his house in Brisbane. He's got no base there at all now, so he's living that traditional retired life now on the Gold Coast and loving it.
And are you quite hands-on on the farm?
Yeah, I'm hands-on in so far as I'm learning, how to be more hands-on. So I'm involving myself and not trying to get in the way. I think you'd more look at.
How would you go, like leading a year?
Not great, not great. I'll have a crack, but not great. Yeah. I spend a lot of my time in the office, and there's a hell of a lot going on with where we want to take the farm, and so that takes up a lot of my time. But as much as I can, I involve myself on the farm, and that's more a product of me wanting to learn from the great people we have here.
No, it's good that you acknowledge that, and there's a lot of owners and that, and wealthy owners, and their egos, they think, I don't need to learn, I don't need to do that.
Yeah.
So it's good
even to the staff to acknowledge you want to learn.
Yeah. Well, that's the only reason we're in this, is that if I was
Still learning, aren't we?
yeah,
You're never done learning this.
I think I'm not comparing myself in any way to Henry Field, but I saw a video the other day where Jim Carrey was speaking about Henry, saying that Henry's so good at what he does because all he does is continue learning and continue teaching himself, and he can probably pick a yearling better than anyone. So I've got no ego in this. I have confidence in myself that I know how to run a business, and I'm very confident where I'm taking this business. But it would be counterproductive for me to pretend that I was an expert in areas where I'm a novice. So I'm only a few years into this game, and I hopefully I'll get to the point one day where I'm teaching the yearling manager how to lead yearlings, but that's nowhere near the case now.
Yeah, but if you're at that point and you're teaching your yearling manager how to lead a yearling,
yeah, that's right.
Maybe
I should know. Yeah. Well, there's a lesson I've just learned.
Yeah. So which areas interest you the most? The matings, the breeding?
Yeah. I'm obviously I'm more as far as the racing arm and the breeding arm. I'm sort of one foot in both camp. I'm really interested in obviously the racing side of things, but the truth of racing, as you both know, in what you guys do is, once you've bought the yearling and you've given it to a trainer, you can involve yourself in it, but you're entrusting the trainer to take that horse to the heights it's going to get to, right? And so, you know, I don't involve myself day to day on, you know, what the trainer did that morning, you know, and did it eat up its feed, and did it, you know, like it's, and placements and all that sort of stuff. Like, I involve myself where I think it's important, and I've got a good relationship with all our trainers, but they know that I'm a relatively passive racehorse owner in that capacity. I mean, we're very professional with how we select our yearlings, and we're pretty clear on the sort of horse, I guess the avatar that we're trying to buy at a yearling sale. And with that said, though, it's not, I'm not meddling in what these trainers are doing. So my time is most spent, you know, on the farm, you know, breeding side of things and the matings, and then from there it's just strategy. You know, it's where do we want to take the farm, how we're going to allocate capital, and you know, how we're going to get this business to where it needs to go. Because at the moment, you know, we're still working towards profitability. You know, it's an expensive exercise to get a farm to turn a profit, and you know, we're still young, but I know the path that we're going to take to get there. It's just making sure that we're on path towards that, and taking the right steps every day towards getting this to where it needs to go. Where you really make a decision is buying the horse and understanding what you think this horse is going to be and what sort of profile this horse is, and then assigning it to an appropriate trainer, right? And then by that very decision, you have understood that they train in a certain way, and that is an appropriate style for that horse. And so really, if that doesn't marry up, it's probably comes back to making the wrong decision for trainer. You know, and as you get further into those relationships with trainers, you understand how they train, how they communicate, and you can't be surprised when your expectations aren't met. You know, say you send a horse to Chris Waller, for instance, who's, you know, we send horses to and we have a great experience with. He's, you know, arguably the best trainer in the country, but you can't send a horse to Chris Waller and expect to be getting phone calls from Chris Waller all the time, right? So it's you know, equally, you know, there's horses, there's trainers that, you know, are very good with 2-year-olds. There's trainers that are very good with stayers. There's trainers that are you know, very good with improving tried horses. You know, so there's a whole plethora of training styles. Yeah, exactly. So we have a lot of trainers we work with, and we understand what to expect when we send horses to them, when we let them do their thing.
Yeah, and you talk about your strategies and stuff. So when you do get involved in the horse, because you've got some runners this weekend, say for instance, mostly Cloudy in the Sydney Cup. You got a Sharon Swartz.
Yeah.
You've had Stefi Magnetica, Stormboy. Like, what's the strategy when you're getting involved in these horses?
So look, most of our horses we're involved in, we've bought as yearlings. I'd say 95% of them. We're also pretty active in the tried horse market. So we've you know, we've gone over Tattersalls and bought horses. We've
is that fillies or
no? Normally when we're buying them over in the UK, they'll typically are geldings. We bought one filly privately over there. We bought out Lolly Yates, who unfortunately had a tendon issue, but she was a handy mare who she is now part of our broodmare band. But you know, we normally are buying them as yearlings, and so our involvement in most of our horses has been from day dot. Most Cloudy, for instance, is, you know, I've got a really good relationship with Trent Busson and Natalie Young and Guy Mulcaster, and they bought mostly Cloudy at the horse and training sale last year. I think it was a horse and... Anyway, it's at Tattersalls last year.
Yeah.
2 years ago. And we took majority share in him, and he's just this out and out staying prospect who won over 2 miles at Ascot on his last run there, and won by the length of the straight just about. So we bought him out. We bought into him at what we thought was a relatively cheap price for what he had done, and he came out and he just was that traditional export who just didn't adapt very quickly, had a woolly coat in summer and was just not looking good at all. And I think Trent and Nat were pretty concerned with how he looked, and they just said he just does not look like a horse who's wanting to be here or wanting to run. Despite that, he just kept on trying, kept on finishing well and winning, and he was winning in town, and he was competitive in stakes races, and he was this was all while looking like he was carrying 400 kilos of wool. So we knew that we were going to have a pretty exciting staying prospect the next prep in, and he went out to the paddock and he was just not looking like he was enjoying his spell at all. And Trent just was like, I think this is just the sort of horse, that typical European horse that just wants to be in work always. Doesn't really matter how they look or feel.
They don't really spell
no.
them at home.
And so we pulled him out of the paddock, and he's come back and he's dropped his coat. Now he looks magnificent now, but he's just this. When I say magnificent, he's dropped his coat, he's got it shine, he's dappled up, but he's still this wiry, weak-looking thing who will just stay for all time. And we couldn't get him to the Melbourne Cup last year. We haven't been able to get him to 2 Mile yet, and I think once we get to 2 Mile, you're going to really see the sort of horse he is. And so I'm really excited about him in the Sydney Cup this weekend. It's his first go at 2 Mile. He sort of failed that way of going last prep. He much preferred going around on the Melbourne leg, and so it's a little bit of an unknown going the Sydney way.
But
that said, and Ascot
Sydney
is that way,
yeah.
exactly. And so that was why we're confused, is that he's won on that leg at Ascot. And so I remember the post-race report after he got rolled in Sydney, and he was just like, maybe he just doesn't like going that way. But I think the conversations have been, he's won like a very good horse in England that way going. So I suspect he'll handle it, and I think he's going to be. I haven't seen that. I looked in the market 20 minutes ago. It's not out yet.
To the punters, too bad, too sad this time.
But we'll be on.
Yeah. I only put this in if he wins.
Yeah, cut.
Yeah. No,
And
he's
you
exciting.
bought a couple of mares over there too. Like, how important do you think that is for a breeder to diversify your broodmare band and try introduce those new bloodlines to Australia?
Well, I think it's just a point of difference. I don't think you want to be too skewed towards that. You have to understand that the market here is after precocity, colonial stallions. They want to see the horse winning in Australia and then buying its progeny. So it's, if you look at, I think a very good example is we're involved with State of Rest, and I think we've only got 5% of him or anything, but nonetheless, he won 4 Group 1s in 4 different countries. He won a Cox Plate and beat Animo in the Cox Plate, albeit in maybe contentious circumstances, but in the end, Stewart's glittered and he won, right?
Yeah.
Animo, the only time they ever faced, lost to State of Rest, and then won obviously a hell of a lot of Group 1s, and is a champion horse. We've bred to him. We love Animo, but he's standing at 120, I think it was, and State of Rest is standing at 44. And so that is a clear indication that the market does not care about what goes on outside of Australia. They want to have seen it, happen here, and they want to be buying from those colonial stallions. And so when you look at mares, there's definitely a place for buying those overseas bloodlines and bringing them back, and I think it adds a bit of variety to your draft, but you can't be too heavy on it. You're going to be clear on what the market's after. So that said, we do shop a lot over there, and we had a mare who we bought called Edith Piaf, who's a Le Havre mare, half the Home of the Brave, and she was I think a million guinea yearling who never raced. And we bought her privately in Falter Frankel, and we brought her out here, and the first Frankel out of her colt we sold at Magic City for 750,000. So the market are after them, but it's just a small, more niche corner of the market. So we will continue to buy and shop over there, but I can't see European mares making up more than 5% of our broodmare band.
And then you said like that the market wants that colonial Australian speed and everything. So how did it come about that you got involved in a Justify call that ended up being Stormboy?
Yeah, so Justify came out to Australia and was covering, and we were looking at all the Justifiers and didn't love any of the ones we saw the first year. I think more looking at it through the lens of American Pharaoh coming out and not firing, and I think everyone was a little bit sort of gun shy on Triple Crown winner coming out and working here at Dirt Horse. And so we were, to be honest, we were of the opinion we're just going to let someone else find out, and if he fires, we'll jump in. But I'd rather not be the one who finds out that they're not going to work here. And so we stayed off. And then Learning to Fly came out, and it was like, Learning to Fly has have a fast net mare, and she didn't look like the typical Justifiers, and so that's just an anomaly. But then he went again and again, and then he was getting, City of Troy, and he's just getting these horses all over the world, winning all the big races, and we were just like, oh shit, we've pulled the wrong rein here. And I remember the conversation between Jim Clark and myself maybe a week prior, saying we really need to start looking at Justify. And I get an email from Gay Waterhouse a week later, who trains a lot of our horses, Gay and Adrian, and they're advertising this magnificent looking Justified colt out of a fast net mare, and a grandson of Sea Change, and we just immediately called Claudia. We had marked it at 2.5, which is very high on our rating scale at the yearling sale, but we were never going to buy it at the yearling sale. And I called Claudia Miller and said, how much of it can we take? And she said, well, how much of it do you want? Okay, you can have 25%. She said, it's yours, 25%, it's fine. And as it turns out, he was Stormboy. And funnily enough, I got a call from... Yeah, that's right. yeah. Remember, he lost the slipper. Funnily enough, I got a call from Claudia, who's obviously, remarkable at her job, and she called me and said, hey, listen, I know you've taken 25% of Stormboy, but one of our good owners has missed out because it sold really quickly. It's missed out, and would you mind, are you open to selling down 5% of your share in Stormboy? I was like, yeah, that's fine. It's fine. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, I don't know who it was. They won't tell me. but anyway, that's the only tragic part of the whole story, because it was just such a fun, and I don't look at that anything other than a funny story. But we were in Stormboy from that point on. I remember the first time I saw him, we went and saw our horses with Gay and Adrian, and Stormboy came out of the box, and he just took my breath away. Like, he didn't look like a 2-year-old. Yeah.
That's funny story.
Yeah, well, he just, you should have seen it. He came out and he just filled the eye, and we'd seen all our horses that day, and I turned to Jim, and both of us just looked like we'd seen a ghost, because he was just such a physical presence, and I think it was Emma was showing us the horse. Emma put the horse away, and we were just like, she was like, "Who's your favourite today?" And we're like, well, Storm Boy was pretty impressive. Anyway, he hadn't trialled at this point. He then trialled twice and won by panels. And then I was on and after the trials, I was already getting texts from the boys at Coolmore being like, "Hey, listen, keep us in the loop around that horse." In fact, I got messages from most studs about the big stallion studs about like, "Hey, what's the go with that horse? What's the ownership of the horse?" You know, yeah.
Did you just
keep
send back that dollar emoji?
Yeah. I sent back the zipped mouth emoji. And so we were on the way to Tat Sale in December, the mare sale, and I was on we were flying while Stormboy had his first start in Sydney, and landed to like 1,000 text messages from everyone just being like, did you see your horse? What about that horse? And the one thing about it is we've had a lot of horses trial like superstars and then get rolled at their first start, you know, and I was a little concerned because both trials he had jumped from an inside barrier and had been scrubbed to muster, and I thought to myself, maybe he had just taken a position up on speed and broken the hearts of the horses, and then during sort of race conditions that maybe the tempo will be different and it's just going to be a different story. And maybe I was just being a pessimist, as most sort of racing people are. But he won so well, and then went to Brisbane, which is the first time I'd seen him race in the flesh, and he won the BJ McLaughlin, but he won it in a way, whilst to the eye it didn't seem like he was going to win the Magic Millions by however much he won. He actually had to do a hell of a lot of work because he missed the start, had to make a move mid-race and was wide. He had a lot of those Queensland horses eyeballing him. It was just not a race that typically a 2-year-old can do what he did in. And he finished off really well. And then obviously Magic Millions happened, which I don't think anyone expected. Maybe the stable did, but I can tell you that no one had alluded to us that he was going to be winning by the margin that he did and with the rating he did and the time that he did. So that was a pretty extraordinary day. And we had already by that point been having conversations with the stud farms about the possibility of them coming in. The ownership group were genuinely pretty resolute on not selling him until after the slipper, and that included us.
And who does the negotiations at that point?
The negotiations were Jim Clark and myself.
Yeah.
We were the managing owner of Stormboy, and Jim works for me.
Being the biggest shareholder.
Yeah. And it was, Jim's a very experienced guy who has worked, been in the industry. I mean, he's my age, but he's been in the industry for a really long time and has a lot of experience all over the world. And the group were pretty resolute that they weren't going to sell Stormboy until the slipper. Especially at that point, the rating that he had run at Magic's was so. I think he rated 105 or something, which that rating alone would have won, I think, most slippers. So they typically improve from then to the slipper. So, I think there was a reason all the studs were knocking, because I think there was probably at that point, no better credentialed stud prospect at that point in the year in some time. And so we were having conversations about how to strategically navigate what was going on, and we'd never been in this position before. The conversation quickly changed to, what if we could extract the value for what he'd be worth after winning the slipper? We'd get it now, and so obviously tied in with kickers. He'd need to still win the slipper, but we would be able to take a bit of, I guess, de-risk, whilst also realising full value for him should he win the slipper. And I guess that sort of ambition would put off most studs, but I think if any studs really showed a meaningful intent with them understanding that they were the metrics we were working towards, I think it showed that they were, serious players in the negotiation, and that we had, I think, 5 offers on the day. We had locked ourselves in Adrian's office at Tulloch Lodge. It was Jim Clark, Adrian and myself, and we said offers need to be in by midday on the Monday, and nothing had come in at, I think it was 11:57. We didn't have anything. And what we did have was 2 of the studs we thought were going to be big players back out. Right, they called us and said, we're not going to put an offer in because we know what you're after, and good luck to you. And we had told the studs that the offer, whoever had the biggest offer first was going to get first crack at the negotiation. And there was 2 that came in. I can't really speak on who was there, but obviously Coolmore were, because Coolmore ended up buying it, and Coolmore, full credit to them that they clearly wanted to buy the horse, and so they had a structure with which they wanted to buy the horse. It was a structure which we, as an ownership group, could all agree to and could endorse to the broader group, and Stormboy was sold. It was about 8 hours that we were going back and forth, but we eventually landed on a deal which made sense for both parties, and I think that's all been pretty well documented. And unfortunately, he didn't go out and win the slipper. But I do think that he's the sort of horse who was always going to be more of a 3-year-old anyway, and I don't think that's wishful thinking or making myself feel better. I mean, obviously, I would have loved to see him win the slipper, but he was, because Adam Hieronymus said to us after, I think he'll win the Triple Crown, but the slipper will be the hardest race for him, right? And I think he'll get better as the trip gets further. Unfortunately, he was just tired by the time I think the slipper took a lot out of him, and by the time he got to the size, he was just not the same horse at all. But I was always so, I guess, comforted by the fact that I feel like when he does win his Group 1s, as you say, he's going to be a 10 furlong horse. But he's always going to have on his CV that Magic Millions win, which it's 2-year-old Precocity speed. He rated it, incredibly on the day. He ran an incredible time, right?
And
so it's to
golden
say
slipper
that,
place.
that's right. Well, that's right. But exactly. And you go to stud and say, look at all these Group 1s he's won, hopefully. But remember, you remember that Magic Millions win.
Yeah.
So that's always there, and I know it's a restricted listed race, but we all know that it's one of the 2-year-old races we target. And it's
and pre-Christmas.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And I think, and again, if he stays healthy and everything goes to plan, a Cox Plate looks pretty good.
Well, Cox, yeah. And the 3-year-old Cox Plate winners, right? It's out of this world. The Savabeel, Statoress, So You Think, Ocean Park, Seamus Ward, Adelaide, I suppose, also. I mean, like, there's Savabeel that I say. So, like, they go on to start and they do it, right? And but he will always have that Magic Millions win there. And you know what? In the end, if you take the financial implications out of him not winning the slipper, if you removed all that and you just watched the slipper, you would say that was an enormous run.
It was. Right? Wrong part of the track. Yeah, you can go on enormous.
So, I must say, the first time I ever felt sort of really uneasy going into race was the size. Not because I didn't think he was ready for the size, but I just felt like there is a chance here he's not going to show up, and he didn't show up. So, If I had my time again, it was still the right decision to run him.
I agree.
Because it's a incredibly valuable 2-year-old race for his stud credential. But in hindsight, there's not a huge surprise that he just floundered that day.
Yep.
Have you found at all like some people are now doubting him?
For sure. People were doubting him after his Skyline win, on a testing track. They're like, oh, maybe he's not a champ. And the